for joining us today and for accommodating a slightly shifted council meeting here. We were, as guys can imagine, we were working flat out on the housing bill work, and we just felt it was prudent to kind of postpone this meeting so that we could have the headspace to actually prepare for it properly. So I appreciate all of you being able to accommodate that. Uh, Hang on. There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, so with that, we'll get started. So have a fairly packed agenda and kind of an open-ended at the question at the end that I hope we have enough time to kind of really get into, but we also have a lot of things that have happened in the last few months since the last advisory council meeting. So I think there's a lot of important things to cover as well. So with that, as per usual, we'll do introductions as a form of attendance. We have a couple of absences that I'm aware of, but if we could just kind of start introducing ourselves as in the order we see here, we will go from there. So I'll start. I'm Alfredo Herrera. I'm the Geographic Information Officer here at OPM. Not sure if Scott is going to be on the call, so maybe Stu, you can go next.
Yeah, my name is Joe Delana, environmental analyst for CTT.
Elizabeth Congo, Enterprise GIS for Connecticut DOT.
Dan Chaya, GIS coordinator for DESPP.
Gary Archambault, Chief Data Officer for Public Health.
Eric Snowden, IT and GIS Manager, Capital Region Council of Governments.
Mark Hoover, I'm the GIS Director at MetroCog.
Hey, John Guskowski, Tyche Planning and Policy Group on behalf of CCM.
Hi, Tracy Grazia, Town of East Hartford GIS Analyst on behalf of CCM.
Emily Wilson, Yukon.
Did not see Peter St-Pierre on the line. And I think Meg McGaffin is out on vacation, so I think we only have the 3 absences today. So with that, thank you. We will get started. Just wanted to kind of pause here briefly in case any one of the council members had anything that they wanted to kind of do kind of from a structure perspective about the council. I don't think that's the case, but that would be a good time if anybody has such ideas or comments.
I do have one thing I would like to bring up if there's time at the end, Alfredo. It's more of a question that came up for Connecticut DOT got a request to provide our sort of empty schema for our drainage network. I think it was requested by a working group for the COGs, maybe. So I don't know if anyone on the call from a COG knows what this is, a little more about the request that came my way, but yeah. I did bring up on the call to them that, like we can provide those things, but it should probably go through you guys, considering there's going to be the culvert schema and all the bridge, obviously the bridge schema is a big issue right now too. So just something that I can start working on my end to kick a lot of that out. But I just felt like it would probably be best going through you guys.
From the COG standpoint, Liz, I mean, this was like an MS4 working group that we were trying to work together, and we were trying to come up with a schema for like the mapping all the networks. And so we were going to start with your network, as you've been doing all the state routes. But yeah, I was going to bring that up in the section 2 at the end, as if we had a schema that was came out of this OPM office, it would probably be best for everyone to use. But that's kind of where David, I think he probably reached out to you.
David and the folks internally, I talked to the internal folks here, but I was like, yeah, we can totally send that data. That's not an issue at all. I just wanted to make sure it was coming through the appropriate bureaucratic channels. So
yeah. That is absolutely fair. Yeah, we can definitely discuss that a little bit later. I think that seems like a good idea and something that we should kind of take a look. And we do have from this council already have that water working group that is dealing with the 3DHP stuff and the bridge and culvert stuff. We can certainly take a look at the MS4 and drainage network kind of specifications, for lack of a better word, to kind of as part of the work of that group. So that's a good catch. Thank you. All right. So just a quick recap and reminder that we did finally get back to full capacity with the hiring of Colin Bergman. He's been on our staff for about 45 days now. He's doing fantastic, and you'll hear more from him in a little bit as he covers some of his initial project, one of his initial projects, and kind of what he's doing there. But with that, I'm going to pass it over to Ashley to start covering some of the GIS office updates that we typically do. Like I said, we're going to kind of run through a few of these, and there'll be a big run through some of certain topics, but by and large, we're just going to try and get through these. But as always, if you have questions or comments or, want clarification on anything, just please feel free to pause us and ask away. So with that, take it away, Ashley.
Alrighty. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everybody is having a great summer so far. Here are some updates. In the last meeting, we talked about the addressing guidance for state agencies. We're calling it guidance. You'll see later on, I think one of the things that we will start working in the GS office will be a larger sort of addressing specifications documentation where it talks about the collection and the management of this data more holistically. But this one is sort of to target state agencies, hoping that with establishing these best practices, we can sort of start working on gradual improvements over time and across the board, because we've seen that a lot of the state addresses are not in a good condition, so they're not very useful for many of the applications that we have. So now it's published. You guys had a time. Can you click next, Alfredo? I think there was like a yeah. So the components of the document, I don't know why I put a random animation there, but the components that you know them is you will go to the address types and the schemas that are known for those address types, like mailing versus location, and try to push some minimal requirements or expected standards and privacy issues that are very important when it comes to address and how to handle address and publish them. From the last time that you guys saw the document that we discussed this document in this meeting, there were not many changes, but we did talked a little bit more about the protection of privacy by limiting address sharing, talking about sensitive locations and, aspects where there's like small n cases and suppression handling that I think although it's not necessarily related to the address standard per se or how to format an address, I think it's important to always discuss it. There's guidance and discussions about how to handle and publishing addresses, especially when there's very few locations. But that's what we have for that. The link or the document is in the GIS office document, so I just put the link there. As always, this is a living document, so version 1.0. So you just feel free to send me feedback at any time, and we'll start collecting them and incorporating them. But that's this topic.
Before we move on quickly, does anybody have any questions on this particular topic or comments? All right, cool.
All righty. Next, this is gonna be real quick because these are just updates. So we also are we went the parcel gamma submissions. What we're seeing is submissions have worked a little bit more smoother, especially seeing full submission across the board for both parcel and gamma. we only have one location, one town that hasn't submitted one of the files, but we're working on it anyway. So it's just like a work in progress. Internally, we're just undergoing review of the statuses. So Leah's working in just our usual parameters, looking at match rates and whatnot. There's still some correction needed. In in the submission, it has been a great great reporting, but the or number of submissions, but we don't, the reports still need work for some. And then on new things that we're seeing is some improvements already from the last year collection to now, like in terms of the match rate side for certain cogs, we're seeing that it's in the map. uh, so we have a tracking site. I can share the link for everybody to see, just to remind you guys that we do have some sort of tracking for all this, and it's public. And other things that changes are regarding the submission is that now the deadlines has changed. So it used to be May 1st, and May 1st to the towns to the COG, and then COGS reports to OPM in July 1st. Now it's changed to September 1st and October 1st. Just as to sort of accommodate a little bit more space for the grant list that happens, sort of the tax roll that happens in October 31st, and then the certification happens in January 31st, the next year. So just giving more time for those that all certification to happen, and then the eventual changes in the parcel layer to catch up with that. So it passed with no problem, so everybody was in accordance with that. So that's that on the submissions. But so far so good this year. Every year we keep getting better. Any questions on this topic? No questions. Okay, next one. I think this is my last slide on this. Yep. So we also been working on the grants. So this time has passed so fast. 2025 was a year of great work, and a lot of that was turning, focus a lot in the administrative part and the project management. We had to secure, the COGS had to secure contract vendors, and I'll have discussions with the municipalities independently. So that was a lot of work from the Council of Governments. So thank you. I cannot say enough for all of the Council of Government representatives that have worked into these grants with the municipalities, the assessors, to improve the parcel data. A lot of the work has focused on recency updates. Honestly, there's a good distribution enough of the work that has been done through the parcel in Keva, but what it seems is like a lot of the towns that needed support in certain areas that they didn't have that before to address those issues. They've been able to focus on that. I think particularly the condo digitization, it's very important. Like you see 20,000 new condos have been digitized, like creating these new geometries. So that means that now we don't have only the condo main, especially with particularly larger condo main areas. Now we have a little bit more precision that, with those geometries that will help with addressing and another number of particular topics. So this is very exciting to have sort of that one-to-one match too with the assessor from the GIS side as well. So yeah, eventually, hopefully, based on like the last reporting, we're seeing increase in parcel camera to parcel and parcel to camera match rates. And hopefully with the map that you see there will be way less orange and the other colors. There will be more white. So yeah, those are all the updates on my areas. Thank you.
Any questions before we move on to the next topic?
Hi, Alfredo. It's Tracy. I actually had a quick question about this. I benefited from this program with the condos, but I was kind of curious across the state how municipalities handle condo mains, and if that's something that because we don't keep we don't keep like the HOA contact as we have no contact person in our CAMA for the condo mains, and we have no acreage. So every 3 years I have to do a process for our grants and bonding. Sorry, the bonds, and the head of finance is like, "How large is the town?" And every time I have to go in and I have to calculate how large, and I'm just curious if I missed it in the standards or something, like, I'm just curious if it's different from, if anybody can chime in with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'll let Ashley kind of chime in since she's probably the most on top of the guidance document because I think some of that is in there.
Okay.
I would have to ask you a follow-up question. So when you talked about and Sad, I'm just trying to make sure that you're not going to talk about condomains right now too, from your experience, and it's on a different question. Okay, so um, the condomain are you talking about the condomain digitization itself, or the record
No.
keeping on the assessor's database so you can
Yeah,
have a linkable?
Yeah. We can talk about this outside of the meeting if this is going to be a larger conversation.
It's going to be a larger
Okay.
conversation.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Definitely.
I just kind of wanted to. Okay. All right. I'll
But
email you.
overall, there's been different for the council. There have been different practices on this. Like for example, the QDS has created a different data set and worked with the assessor also directly, I think, to integrate at least a record that says condomain with a unique ID.
Yeah.
To always preserve it. Obviously, that requires more work with the assessor and with the vendor and whatnot. But that's been a discussion. And then we can talk also. Mark Hoover also has done work with condo digitization themselves at MetroCog. So maybe we could have a larger.
Oh yeah,
group.
our condos that were digitized this time around.
Yeah.
And so that's not there's no digitization issue. It's more of like
the record. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Okay, Thad, I'll call you.
Yeah. Be glad to talk.
So,
Thanks.
all right, thank you.
All right. Excellent discussion. Any other questions or comments? All right, cool. Next topic is imagery. So everybody's excited about this stuff. So the big highlight here is the LiDAR pilot data is due soon, and by soon I mean tomorrow. We are getting the first sample data tomorrow. The pilot area that was selected for initial kind of pilot review is in the Wilton Norwalk area. It's like right on the border along one of the state highways there. And I just wanted to call out that we're going to be getting, as part of the pilot deliverable, we're not getting everything that we're getting, but we're getting kind of like a really solid sample. So obviously we're getting the point clouds, we're getting DEMs, we're getting the intensity raster, we're getting a preliminary copy of the 2D building footprints. And then kind of in addition, because it's part of their QA QC process already, we will be receiving a difference raster between 23 and 26, which is, from my perspective, that's one of the things I'm really excited about with this. It's like, all right, let's see what changed. Like this is a similar flight with similar specs. Obviously, there were some slight differences in the way that it was captured that I hope will make it better. I think it will. And when we do a future update, we will have more information about kind of like the differences between 23 and 26, and at least the capture process. Those materials just were not ready in time for this meeting. And then I think I showed last time the raw point cloud sample that we got from Dewberry from the Yale Bowl, just because it happened to be so dense and they kind of wanted to show it off. So we took another kind of neat screenshot where you see people playing sports on the field. It's kind of, every time we look at this data set, it's just kind of wild and impressive. Which moves us to the statewide ortho. So what you are seeing here is the current state, and there's still some processing to do, as you can tell from like the striped nature of things, that all the blending has to happen, and all of this. And this pilot deliverable is about a week or two, maybe 3 at the most, kind of behind the LiDAR deliverable, mostly because they are prioritizing the production work itself. And so like for the subcontractor at Dewberry that's doing this work, the pilot deliverable is almost kind of like a side quest. So we did get we are going to be getting kind of quick views along with the LiDAR pilot deliverables. These are not full resolution, but they're close enough to give us a pretty good look as to what we're going to be seeing, especially in, if you look at some of these, there's some slightly greener areas than we might like in some parts of the state. So like as you can see there from the two highlighted areas, we are getting two different pilot areas for the imagery. One is going to be the same as the ortho, so we can stack everything and look at it all together. And then the other one is up near Hartford University or Hartford College. I forget which. Yeah, University of Hartford. There we go. That's the name. So it's up there near that area, just to kind of get a sense of, what does the vegetation look like? I mean, not that we can do anything about it now, but it just lets us understand, like what use can we make of this data? What are going to be the limitations, and what could be some maybe some unexpected advantages of the way that this flight happened. So that is the current state of where we are with the imagery and the elevation data. Does anybody have any questions about all of that?
I'm also going to chime in really quick. I don't think we talked about this at the last meeting, but the impervious cover data that we've been talking about is now live as a service on the geodata portal. So that's all set. That's in the right projection, and then it's also on CT Eco as a download in the correct projection. So just FYI for everyone, because I think we've talked about this a few times.
Jonathan, go ahead.
Is this data going to be available for us? We have LiDAR as part of our UAS system. So when we do damage assessments, this would actually help to have the flown data that you all flew, and then we can compare it to whatever the damage was. So if it is available, that'd be great for us.
Yeah, so all of the 2023 data is already available. It's either through available either through the Geodata portal or directly for download through CT Eco. If you want, we can have a conversation about like what deliverables you guys need over there at Demis, and we can help you out and make sure that you get what you need and you're queued up to have all of the latest information. And it also is a quick reminder about the kind of overall timeline of the 2026 data capture. So the pilot, as I stated before, is basically due now. And we expect production deliveries to begin sometime in mid-August, proceeding incrementally all the way up until about November. So by the end of the year, mostly because of the funding source, because it's ARPA funds and they have to be done by the end of the year. They are going to be done. I think we have about 6 months of latitude for some smaller portions of the project to kind of get over the finish line, but we do expect all of this data to be in complete by December, and then working with Emily to get it all hosted sometime in early next year. That is kind of currently the plan. I don't know if you want to say anything else about that, Emily, at least about that part of it.
Just that we'll do it as fast as we can once we get it. That's about it.
Yeah, no, and we obviously appreciate all of your efforts in helping us get all of this done. It is a hugely valuable resource to everyone involved. So, yeah. So yes, Jonathan, reach out to me and then we'll have a conversation about your guys' needs for this data, and we'll make sure you get what you need.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. Anything else? All right, I'm going to pass it back over to Sarah to talk about 3DHP and PA 2533.
Awesome. Yeah, you go to the next slide. So at the end of May, I think it was, the bond commission meeting was held and our request for funding for the 3DHP was approved. So we are now in the process of moving ahead with all of that. This funding is going to cover the entire 3DHP development for Connecticut. It's going to support the data publication portion of it, and it's also going to cover the statewide 1 meter land cover through the NOAA CCAP. So that's the Coastal Change Analysis Program through NOAA. And on the slide, you can see the land cover categories that covers. So we're going to be getting that data through this, and that whole process is underway. Let's see. And for the 3DHP process in general, we have the joint funding agreement and the task orders in progress. We're just waiting on some edits and approvals, and then the actual work should be starting relatively soon. And for the 3DEP data, which is the USGS initiative to have public accessible nationwide elevation data, our data is in the process of being accepted into the 3DEP program. There were a few corrections that USGS requested on our side, but that's in progress of getting updated. 2 of the data sets have been submitted, and there's 1 in progress. And so when the 3DHP program starts developing that data, they use that 3DEP data that is accepted into the program. So all in all, this is all continuing to move forward, and we are excited for the 3DHP data development to begin soon. That's all I have on that. And so we've talked about this a few times, but we've been working on making some progress on this side for our bridge and culvert data collection. So we are building a statewide data set of all the bridges and culverts in Connecticut, which stems from a legislative mandate for the submission of this data. You go to the next slide. So that is through Public Act 2533, which says that each municipality will submit a GIS data file of all the culverts and bridges within their municipality. So this is a really, massive effort, and we have been mapping out a plan for this, which you guys have seen before. But at the moment, we are working on these 3 parts that are highlighted. So we're developing the data specification, which includes the definitions and the data schemas for what is going to be expected to be submitted through this mandate. The preliminary data aggregation, which I'll talk a little bit more in detail in a second, and then filling in the gaps, which I'll also talk about, but we're going to leverage some other programs and data sources that we have to try to identify as many culverts and bridges as we can from the data end, and then hand that data over so that people can go out and actually verify those locations and collect information on the structures. So go to the next slide. So for our preliminary data aggregation, the culverts and bridges do have, some overlap in their data classifications, but largely these are going to be 2 separate items. For the culverts, we had requested to COGS and municipalities that they send us any currently available data sets that they have. So whether that's the MS4 data or any other inventories that they keep, we just wanted to get a better idea of what currently exists across the state in all these forms. So we got data from 2 COGs and 17 municipalities. And then we also have the CTDOT data set, which cover the culverts that run under state roads. And then the North Atlantic Aquatic Connectivity Collaborative, and those track stream crossings. So that's a data set that we're also using to see if we can find some culverts from that. And then from the bridges, Obviously, these are a little bit easier to identify because they tend to be above ground, but we're working off of the DOT data set, and that covers the state bridges over 20 feet. I think I have that definition right. And then we're also utilizing our LiDAR and impervious cover data, which have categorized identified bridges. So we can try to pull out as much from that as we can. So you go to the next slide. So as we've been exploring these culvert data sets and starting to aggregate them, we are seeing that there's a lot of mixed geometry types. So they're in all different forms. There's lines, polygons, points. There isn't a super consistent line usage. Some of them are using lines to show the entry and exit points. Some are the length of the culvert. Some of them are making a makeshift rectangle of the culvert using lines. Then we're also seeing a lot of duplicate features for single structures within a single data set. And we're also seeing some location mismatches for the same structure across multiple data sets. So this is all just, a data exercise to see what the data is currently looking like and how we can develop our schema and specification to make this all into one cohesive statewide data set. So we're asking for the culverts to be a line. That's the center line length of the culvert from the inlet to the outlet in the direction of the water flow. And that should cover culverts that are 1 foot to 6 feet in length. And then culverts over 6 feet are going to be classified as the bridges. So you go to the next slide. And so we also started to pull together the DOT and impervious cover, the bridge category and the impervious cover, to pull together one big data set of all the bridges that were identified that way. So that's going well. And then we're also going to incorporate the bridge data that we got from the LiDAR into that as well, so that hopefully we're going to cover a lot of the bridges in the state that way. And so we're going to build out that data set and then have the schema available to fill in. And for bridges, we're asking for it to be a polygon, which is the outline that's approximately the footprint of the bridge, and then for all bridges that are larger than 6 feet in length. Let me go to the next slide. And then for our culvert and bridge specification that will hopefully be coming out soon, there's going to be 3 major parts to it. One is the specification document, so that's going to include all the background and the definitions and the detailed data fields written out in one big document. And then we'll have a spreadsheet that has, all those fields and all of the details broken out that way. And then we're also going to provide some type of file geodatabase that has all of the data that we have available in it, and like for the bridges, all of those, the impervious cover bridges and the LiDAR bridges in there, so that all you have to do is fill in the information in the schema. And we're going to pre-populate information wherever we can. So with the DOT bridges, all the information is going to come over from the DOT data set, and hopefully this will make it a little bit easier to collect and submit this data. And then we go to the next slide. And then we are working on identifying what minimum data is needed for a valid submission. So PA 2533, it largely focuses on flood mapping. So that's kind of been our focus on building out the schemas, making sure that we have the appropriate fields needed to do that statewide flood mapping. But, we understand that this is a massive ask and this is hard work to do. So we're trying to identify what the minimum data needed for a submission like this could be, and what fields could be calculated and derived from other sources So what can be calculated from other fields within the data, and what can be derived from the LiDAR. So like the inflow and outflow elevations, we should be able to derive those from the LiDAR as long as we have the the lines and the polygons of the structures. So things like that. So we're looking into those right now. Let me go to the next slide. And so for the next steps of this, we are continuing to have conversations with a lot of the subject matter experts to refine our specifications and our schemas and to kind of just have a sanity check that this is what is expected for this type of work. So we're continuing to talk to those people and making edits to the draft. Soon we're going to be able to send out the documentation to the COGs to get their input. And I know that a lot of them are trying to start this work soon, so we want to try to get the ball rolling for that. And then in the future, we're gonna work on setting up a mechanism to collect the submissions. So it'll probably be something similar to how we collect parcel data, but we're gonna set that up. And then the first annual collections are due May 2028. So that's about 2 years out. And that is an annual collection. So we are, we expect the first few times around, the data is not going to be perfect. But we're hoping that setting it up this way will be a good starting point, and then we can work to build out a full statewide data set that is useful in a lot of ways. I think we go to the next slide. And then part of PA 2533, there are a few other data collection efforts that are in there, including the municipal collecting data from the municipal hazard mitigation plans and the regional, municipal, and local POCDs. So those are the Plan of Conservation and Development. So the goal is to try to collect this data since it's unique local and regional data. So we want to be able to see what was used in these plans and integrate that into statewide data sets so that those can be used in other utilities. And I think that's all I have for 3DHP. If anyone has any questions or comments. Okay. So next up is the housing bill. So first up is our brand new hub site that we officially launched last week. So that's the Connecticut Housing Data Hub. And the purpose of this is to be a collection of all sorts of housing focused GIS data and maps and tools. So we work on a lot of projects either directly or adjacently that are housing related. So once this bill was passed, we figured that now's a good time to kind of pull this all together into one hub. So this was officially launched last week. Within this, there's a data library, which is just us pulling together data sources that would be useful for housing work. So all this data is publicly available already, and you could probably already find it on the Geodata portal or in other organizations' portals, but this is a place where we're going to pull it all into one place if you're specifically looking for housing related projects. And we'll continue to add to this library as, data sets come up or are created or things like that. And so also the town housing dashboard, which we've talked about a few times in the past, we made it a few years ago, that now lives here. It used to live on the Geodata portal, but that whole thing now lives on this website. And then the 2025 Act Concerning Housing Growth, which is PA 25-1, which I'm going to be talking about more. That is also a big component of the housing hub. So we go to the next slide. And so this is the housing bill. It started as HB 8002. It became PA 25-1, and it is now in the Connecticut General Statutes in Chapter 124B. So it's had a few different names over the last 6 or 7 months, but it is a housing legislation that is intended to expand affordable housing and middle housing development in Connecticut. So it's a really big bill with a lot of mandates. But if we go to the next slide, we here are largely focusing on the developable land inventory. So the developable land inventory is required for several parts of the bill, and it has its definition within the statutes. It's land that can be developed based on commercially reasonable assumptions, and then that excludes some categories like public use, open space, conservation easements, deed restricted properties, wetlands and water courses, and land with tough topographic features such as steep slopes. And we go to the next slide. And so the role of the GIS office in this, we were specifically called out by statute to provide data tools for the municipalities and COGs to use together with their local data to compile this inventory of developable land as defined by that definition that we had here. So we've been working on developing those tools and getting those out the door so that they can be used by the municipalities and COGs as they're starting this process, because they have some deadlines on these coming up in 2027. So you go to the next slide. So our tools for this include that hub site that has the data library. So that's one piece of it, is collecting all that data into one collection. And then also the developable land inventory technical guidance, which I'll talk a little bit more in detail about in a bit. But that's basically one big document that pulls together a bunch of information and data sources and links and methodologies that could be used for this inventory. And then we've also developed a few data sets and feature layers and a bunch of really awesome map viewers. And one thing that I wanted to talk about was that although we developed a lot of these tools for the for this housing bill, it was driven by the housing bill. A lot of them have broad applications that extend far beyond the housing bill and will be useful in a lot of different circumstances. So I'll quickly walk through these, and you'll be able to find them on the portal. So for our data, we've talked about this a few times, but our steep slopes layer, we have that up and available to use. That is using our 2-foot and 10-foot DEM to have to show moderate, steep, and very steep slopes. So and it's in a polygon form, so it can be queried by town. So that's a really cool data set that's available, and it is directly relevant to these statutes. And then also we have a few feature layers that we were able to query the parcel data for. Ashley went through and looked through all the parcel data and came up with some rough queries so that you can see public use parcels, vacant parcels, and the open space parcels, and we have that available as the feature layers. We also include the queries in there, and we have the SQL queries that you can use to make your own on GitHub, so that these are a really good starting point for these topics. The data, this is a rough cut just based on the parcel data, but a good starting point going forward. And then another piece is our map viewers. So these are interactive map viewers that you can zoom into them at the parcel level and click on a parcel and see a lot of great information on each of these topics based on the parcel. So for example, in the wetlands and watercourses one, you can zoom into a parcel, click on it, and you'll be able to see based on the soils wetlands data, the NHD data, and the NWI data set, how the percentage and the amount of land in each parcel that is in a wetland, that had the percent that has the water course in it, and things like that. So a lot of really great viewers that is on the housing hub now, but it's largely intended to support a high level understanding of Connecticut. So these aren't meant to replace a GIS analysis on these specific topics once they get into the details, but just to have a high level understanding of what the landscape in Connecticut is looking like in these topics. They're a really great resource for that. And then we go to the next slide. And so the technical guidance is it's a really big document that is full of links and data sets and methodologies. Did you want me to demo this quick?
That's up to you. It might be worth showing at least a little bit because there's some interesting stuff
Okay.
in there.
Yeah, I have it open, so I can share my screen really quick. And I'll scroll through it.
Go for it.
All right, I think you should be able to see it. Yeah, so developable land inventory, technical guidance, the quick summary page, the quick executive overview of the background and definitions and how this fits into the larger housing growth planning process. And this kind of talks about each section. So we have how this analysis is used throughout the housing growth planning process. The statutory definitions. This is a really long section that goes through each of those exclusions and talks about data sets that we recommend using, any caveats that we can identify, any, these queries for the parcels, things like that. So a lot of recommendations for that. Some methodologies for identifying vacant and redevelopable land, and a section for creating the maps, kind of the maps that will be included in these housing growth plans and the symbology for them. So we have map elements, so just talking about what should largely be included on the maps, like, basic things like the title and town name and things like that. And then in the symbology, we walk through each layer that we're expecting to see for each of the maps, and talking about the symbology with the fill and the outline and the transparency. And then we have example maps that use that symbology, so that we can show what this map would be looking like in the end. So we have that for all 3 maps here. Let's see what else. We have an FAQ section. And, this is a relatively living document. So as things come up and things need to be altered, we will absolutely update this. So there's a change log to just talk about what the updates are. Yeah, so that's just a really quick run through of this document. I can put the link in the chat to this, but I think you guys already have the housing maps link. Oh, yeah. Ashley already put the links in the chat, so you guys can check those out in there. And yeah, I think that's all I have for housing, unless there's any questions.
This looks really good, guys. This is great. Thanks.
It is John Guskowski. I've been working on the other end of this too with the Connecticut the Council on Housing Development, and we've been eagerly anticipating this, and I'm still working my way through it. I want to read every word, but it looks great. It's really well organized. So
Awesome.
great work by your department.
Awesome. Yeah, and then one last thing, next steps. There are some other maps that we're expecting to be included in the housing growth plan. So we're working with some of the other parts of OPM who are developing the housing growth guidance in general. So we're going back and forth with them about what maps will be included, and then we're going to help develop standards for those maps so that we see some consistency across the reports. Yeah, I think that's it for this.
That's great. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments, concerns, etc.? All right. Well, please take a look. Oh, Mark, go ahead.
Oh no, I just wanted to like agree with John. I thought it was really well put together. I mean, when I first reviewed it, it seemed to go really like great step by step. All the different expressions you have in there and how to do it. I know there was concern from COGS based on like some of the like parcel level analysis, but that wasn't really on you guys per se. You know, it was just kind of the nature of the bill. So when I reviewed it, I thought it was really well put together, and I thought you guys did a great job.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I will say this was very much a group effort. I think everyone on the team has had some influence or part of this project in a very significant way. Even Colin, that started like 45 days ago-ish, has had major contributions to this project as well. So we were very happy that he was able to dive right in on that. And the amount of work that Sarah in particular has put in on this is monumental, and I can't overstate enough how good a job she did. So, at least from my perspective, we are very pleased with the way this is turning out and the reception that it's had. And like Mark said, some of the issues, we understand them, and they're not necessarily at anything that specifically said, but we are taking all of those comments and concerns into consideration. So, like, one additional bit of context is when we did release the hub site, we did hold back the guidance for like an extra week, just so that we could make sure that we incorporated any changes and adjustments that needed to be made based off of the comments that we received, because we received so many, and the nature of them was important. So we wanted to acknowledge that, and so we held back the guidance a little bit, but as you all know, it is now out as of yesterday. So and it's live on the site. So please take a look. And like Sarah said, this is an evolving document, and as such, we will continually take feedback and new ideas. If someone has a really good methodology for anyone in any of the topics, that you're working on, whether it's at a COG level or a municipal level, any good ideas are good ideas. And so if you have one, please send it our way. We will evaluate it and figure out how best to include it in the document if appropriate. So, don't feel like any of this is kind of etched in stone. It is very much not. We do have erasers handy and can modify things as needed. And we do want to see this evolve, because also, like, the first ones of these plans are not due until at least 2027. So we expect there to be more changes and modifications and evolution as people start actually using this guidance. I like to say, we survived first contact, but now that people are going to try and actually use this and operationalize this guidance, we're going to see, things that we missed, things that, maybe need to be changed or tweaked and things like that. And so please just know that we are willing in here to make those changes, and that this is just going to keep getting better over time. All right. And with all of that said, I will pass it off now to Colin to say a few words about one of his first projects here on the team.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to be discussing briefly here the Geodata portal item audit. So this is an effort that relates back to the portal publishing guidelines that had a version that were, officially finalized and released last June. So this is really an effort to create a mechanism to kind of more formally monitor the adherence of items that are published to the GeoData portal to those standards and kind of, create an enforcement mechanism. So, before I dive into the audit process, I just want to give a quick overview and refresher of the publishing guidelines. So as I mentioned, those were, the current version of those guidelines were released last June in 2025. And really, they, make an effort to formalize standards for documenting and publishing items to the portal. So this includes things like every item standard metadata, things that are on the item details page, like the summary, description, thumbnail, credits, making sure items have proper tags and valid categories, and then also ensuring that any data services have valid projections. So during this process, we've identified a few different small tweaks that we want to make to those guidelines. And we're planning on, kind of rolling out an additional final draft by the next advisory council meeting. All right, next slide. Yeah, so getting into the actual audit process itself. So there's really two parts to the audit process. So we have an automated Python script that we're planning on running. So this Python script sort of back checks all of the content items against those guidelines systematically. And then, creates a score for each item in sort of two different categories. So we have a required score, a required item score, and a suggested item score. And then based on those scores, it subsequently assigns each item a passing or a failing grade. And we split up those scores into the two categories of required and suggested, really just to make it less onerous on the publishing agencies to sort of retroactively go back and make edits to the existing content that we do have. So that's why we really pulled out what we thought were the most critical checks within the publishing guidelines and mark those as the ones that are really required. Again, this is still very much a work in progress, and I'll go over on the next slide what those required and suggested checks are in a little bit more detail, but this is definitely something where if folks have any input on what they think is most critical or what they want the process to really dive in and check on, definitely open to hearing those suggestions. So then the audit script then reports out those audit scores and documents all of the content item scores within an interactive ArcGIS Online dashboard. And the intent of the dashboard is to really kind of serve as a living document, just to kind of increase the ease of access and allow it to be a bit of a more robust process that's more easily monitored versus kind of the alternative, which would be sending around periodic static reports to folks. So this is kind of meant to be a central location where folks can come in and check to see, the publishing agencies can check to see how they're doing in terms of the guidelines. All right, so next slide. So yeah, as I mentioned, we split up those checks that the audit is performing into two different categories, so required versus suggested. And again, very open to hearing if folks have suggestions on what should be suggested versus required. So this is definitely just sort of a first pass that we've taken. So under the required checks, we have the license info or the credits on the item details page, just the existence of having a thumbnail, having that item summary snippet, having a valid projection, having at least one category assigned, and then also having those categories be valid so that things are categorized correctly within the, the front-facing portal webpage. And then we've actually split out. Initially, we had in the guidelines it lists a number of required tags. In terms of these checks, we've just for now made Connecticut and CT as the required tags, and then any other tag that's outlined in the guidelines is considered suggested. And then under the suggested checks, we have the standard metadata being complete. So that's that XML metadata file that's associated with each item. We're still developing a check right now. There's some limitations with the Esri API that makes it a little bit more difficult to go in and really confirm that that's filled out properly. So that's something we're still working on. Making sure items are updated within the past 1 year, kind of flagging it if things have been sitting there for a long time and haven't been updated. Those suggested tags that I mentioned, and then the different sub elements within the item description that are outlined in the guidelines, so the classifications, currency, lineage, credits, and scale range. And then the small tweaks that I mentioned earlier, again, these are really tweaks, nothing big picture, mostly just tweaks to the guidance to make the systematic and kind of programmatic checking aspect of the audit a little bit more possible. So inserting different like keywords within the description just so a script can go through there and scrape the information properly. All right, so next slide. So yeah, with all that said, I just wanted to give a little sneak peek at the dashboard. I have a link in here. I actually think that I still need to share this out with the right groups. But I have the screenshot in here that I can very quickly go through. So if you want to go to the next page, I have some stuff called out. So over on the left-hand side of the screen, we have all of the items in the portal listed out with their name, who owns them, what type of item it is, and then that kind of gives that big picture look at whether it failed the audit or passed. And then it has those required and suggested scores that I mentioned, as well as a link to open the item in ArcGIS Online if you want to make any edits. Then over to the kind of right middle section of the dashboard, we have the more detailed audit results. So it's scrolled in a little bit of a weird position there in my screenshot, but it's again split up into those two sections, the required versus the suggested, and then it gives a more detailed report out of each individual check that it's doing. And then in some cases, it'll give even further information. So for instance, of the required tags, it'll list out which tags are, if in this case it didn't pass, so it lists out which existing tags are on the item and then which missing required tags need to be added, so it kind of gives a finer grain of detail. And then on the far right, we have just some overall metrics, just some counts on how many items have failed, how many have passed, the average required score, both overall and by agency. And then we have a list of the different sub-checks and counts on how many are passing and how many aren't passing. So if, we can kind of break down and see if there are any trends, if there are specific checks that are, frequently failing that, we might need to clarify guidance on or, kind of come after, or not come after, but, remind folks a little bit more about. And then on the left-hand side, we have some filters, so you can, filter for specific checks, whether or not they failed or passed, and pull up the items that failed or passed certain checks. And then you can also, in the top right-hand corner, filter by agency as well. All right, so I think that's all I have. So I'll open it up if anyone has any questions or comments overall on this effort. Yeah,
Emily, go ahead.
Yeah, first, thanks for not throwing any of us under the bus who might have failed, a bunch of them. My
Us
question is about the 1 year since change that you mentioned. And there are a lot of data sets that don't change. So kind of once they're published, like I'm thinking imagery, for instance, the data is collected, it's not going to change. Is there a way to make an exception, or, we can talk about this offline as well, but I just thought I'd bring up that criteria.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, that could even be something that's maybe filtered into a third category, is not even just like a scoring item, but just as kind of like a flag. But yeah, we can definitely discuss that offline. There certainly could be a way to sort of override that check and say like, hey, this is a data set where it's not going to change, so let's not keep, checking that every single time we run it. I think that's definitely something that we can add.
Okay, and we'll look forward to working through. I think we're hopefully not in horrible shape, but working through the details, especially once like tags and categories and everything are standard. So thanks for getting us organized.
Yeah, absolutely.
would love to just talk to you further about this, because I think internally on the DOT side, I would love to have this in our internal portal.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely happy to share around the script and the dashboard as well.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of piggyback on a discussion that was had at the agency data officers meeting around kind of AI and governance and stuff like that. I mean, like doing these kinds of checks and making sure that all of our metadata and all of that stuff is well prepared for kind of programmatic, automatic, LLM consumption is going to be more important. It still doesn't solve necessarily the problem of getting them to look at a government website in the first place, but at least if we could solve the problem of once they do, the stuff there makes sense and is intelligible and processable. I think that is a really important first step for us. And then, and it also kind of helps the proverbial humans in the room trying to use the data as well, because then they, try and use the data as well, and that way they understand what they can and can't do with it, and what it is and what it isn't, and all of those things. So, I think it's kind of the next natural step after publishing the publishing guidelines is like, okay, now let's check against them and see how we're doing, and then and then that way kind of break it down so we can all collectively fix all of our stuff, because like I said earlier, our stuff is just as bad as anybody else's in terms of completeness. And there was a previous version of this where like literally every item on the geodata portal failed. So so don't feel bad if it looks bad, because we are all in about the same kind of shape. I would say there is no one that is kind of standing out as an outlier in this regard. All right. So kind of on that slightly larger picture note, I did want to transition to kind of like a little bit more broad discussion. I'll kind of turn off the presentation here because there's not really anything else to show. I just wanted to kind of have a conversation about so we've produced the publishing guidelines, we've done the parcel drafting guidelines, the GIS clearinghouse document is nearly done. We will likely kind of, circulate that for approval for the next council meeting and try and get that across the finish line, amongst other different topics. So as we've gotten a few things done and a few things that were like pretty obvious that needed to be tackled like right away, we started thinking it's like, okay, there's like any number of different directions. And as you all know, there's only 5 of us here in the GIS office, and plus the 10 or 12 of you on the council. So the question I wanted to pose to you all as council members is, from a governance perspective, like what kind of problems or guidance and things can we try to solve? Like like the GIS office can kind of throw some energy behind. Do we need to create a new working group on a different topic that maybe we haven't really given a lot of attention to? I know Ashley is getting in the process of getting ramped up on addresses, and we had a big discussion about that with DOT earlier a couple weeks ago. So like, there are some places where we're pretty sure we're going to go, but we also want to take a moment to kind of hear from the council and say, what would you have us do? Please advise us.
I don't know if it's exactly governance related, but I just know that there are some things, I'm sure I've brought this up before, like schools, fire stations they come up a lot as layers that people would like. I know we end up just like geocoding the ed site stuff that's up on like Connecticut data, but maybe that kind of goes along with the addressing. It can be kind of tough to find some of these places, but I know something that's the community would probably really like to have.
Yeah.
Fire stations,
agreed.
Police stations, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think Thad in the chat said critical social or community infrastructure. Yeah, like those kinds of things. That makes sense.
Yeah, especially when we're doing some like, road gets washed out kind of stuff.
If I could say one thing on that topic is that we do have discussed this in prior meetings, and we also have the emergency management working group that I can bring this up to. I think you are there, Liz, sometimes, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, I know
DOT.
we've talked about it somewhere on a meeting, whether it was here or there, but
there is some minor discussion to have between the accessibility to this data and having it readily map internally for state agencies and those that do respond to these issues versus having it widely available because of the sensitivity of the nature of this data as well. Having all the schools mapped at once is good, but it's also not great for other aspects, right? The security issue, having this data so clear and knowing where all the schools are, perhaps it's not a great idea, but perhaps we can service this in a different way and have it always spatialized or the lat longs components with them, so it's easily to map. But I just wanted to put that out there.
Just to kind of piggyback on our comment before, any kind of statewide things like the MS4 mapping, coming up with some standards that, the cogs and towns could use together. For some of the data sets, like in the housing bill, where we have statewide data, but you kind of want some local data to help improve it, like an open space data set. If there was some guidance on how to create that and what attributes you would like in that data set, I think that would help kind of populate and make that whole statewide data set better.
Gary, go ahead.
So I appreciate the work on the guidance documents for addresses, but it might be nice to have some similar guidance documents on Scott's side of the house, where if we're going to be producing, say, aggregate data about something, which we produce a lot of, that we're including the right type of identifier so that they can easily be used spatially. So whether it's FIPS codes or the actual whatever town numbers or whatever that is, so that it's easy to use across those two realms.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a thing that we've seen implemented in a widely varying fashion.
Yep.
We did start integrating FIPS codes to the parcel as well for that very reason, because it's much easier to aggregate from a tabular, even tabular perspective. So yeah.
Yeah, we also did it with the municipal layer from DOT. We basically kind of republished it with those in there, as well as doing the dissolves for the counties and the RPAs and all of that, making sure that the FIPS codes were included so that people could kind of join them easier, at least for like the non-spatial folks.
Right.
Oh, this is all really great stuff. Definitely important topics, and we want these kinds of ideas and kind of things to kind of remember. Like we've probably talked about all of the things that we need to tackle, but I think part of this exercise for me, what it does is like hearing the discussion around it and people bringing it up helps us kind of prioritize what order we tackle them in, let's say. So then that way we kind of say, okay, this is a topic that is proverbially on fire. Let's go deal with that first. Hopefully not literally on fire, although that has happened. Anything else? Any other ideas or topics?
I know it was kind of a topic when this organization first started. It was like the town boundary layer, and I know there's been some work done on that, but I don't know. I mean, I know it's a lot more complicated subject than just, oh, we got to map out where the lines are. But if there was, I don't know, some work that your office could do to try to figure out some of the discrepancies between boundaries and come up with an authoritative one, so we can try to map these parcels a little better.
Yeah, that is, as you put it, a very tricky subject. Um, Once again, I'll call back to the conversation that we had with DOT the other day. This actually was a topic of discussion. You know, as it relates to specifically the Census Bureau, because like with the census boundaries, like their version of our municipal boundaries is really, really bad. And especially in some places, and some of the real impacts of that is because they use those to define the census tracts and the census blocks, then that ends up putting like voting districts incongruous with like a town border. So, like, say, sake of argument, Branford has to produce 10 ballots for residents of East Haven because the census tracts are on the wrong side of the actual line. So, there is a discussion on our end to be had of like, okay, we know we have a baseline that's already better than the Census Bureau, and let's figure out like, okay, what it is that we need to, how do we need to communicate that to them so that we can get that fixed. But I think in the process of doing that, in the process of understanding like what they need upstream of us, then we can kind of figure out, okay, how do we need to manage the data so that we can get the right information downstream of us at the regional and local level to kind of inform that accurately. Because ultimately, like we looked in the statute of this a while ago, like back when we first started, and like the source of truth and the point of authority for all of this are the towns themselves. And then it really, like if there is a dispute or disagreement, it definitely goes to the judicial branch straight out. So like there's not a lot of wiggle room for either us or DOT, i.e., survey division of DOT, to kind of interpret much of anything and kind of rubber stamp it as authoritative. But the best that we can do is kind of improve the quality and kind of remind people of like, hey, tell us where it's better. And if you did do a survey, make sure we're aware of it and have it so that we can digitize it and represent it better and then syndicate it on up and out to the private sector and the federal government that needs it for all of these other things. So we have had it, at least on the internal side, we've had some discussions about that. Like we literally just started the discussion back up a couple weeks ago about this. If you want to have a kind of, if you want to participate in some kind of conversation about that, we'd be happy to kind of bring in some kind of more of the local stakeholders, because once again, you guys are closer to the source of the data than we are in many cases, and that it may be beneficial to kind of understand some of what you guys know.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, that sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anything else? We have a few more minutes. I know this is pretty open-ended and it's hard to kind of pull things out of thin air. But like as you all know, we will take feedback at any time. We don't have to, leave it to just this one instance of having this conversation. If you come up with another idea in an hour or from now or tomorrow, just, give us a ring, send us a message. We are more than happy to discuss these. We also would like to say that we know we're a little bit behind on the strategic planning process. We are due to kind of revise those. Our aim is to have the update document kind of ready to go by the next advisory council meeting. We'll see how close we get to that, but I think, like we've already made some progress on that regard. But this feedback and this information is like absolutely critical to that. So if you have any ideas or if you have any kind of comments, concerns, questions, or want to give us a direction, say go that way, just let us know. With that being said, we do have a few moments for public comment. So if anyone that's not a council member would like to say anything or make a comment about things, I know we have been kind of allowing non-council members to kind of speak every now and then, but here's like the kind of formally open open time for the members of the public attending this meeting to kind of chime in and say anything that's on their mind. So if you would like to speak, just raise your hand and we'll call on you. All right. Well, with that, as always, we are an open door. Please chime in. Don't feel like this is the only time to kind of say what's on your mind. And thank you all for attending, and thank you all for your time. And thanks for a productive meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.